I'd like to welcome you all today to our session. We are, the brochure says we are providing strategies for preserving culture in a growing company. And that's our intent today. I think we're probably going to talk a little bit about, touch on some of the same topics that some of our speakers did, but this isn't meant to be two old guys dictating to you guys what works and what culture is. We'd like to have this kind of be interactive. So with that, I guess what I'd like to do is start the program. My name is Gryczka. I work at National Exchange Bank. I'm one of the vice presidents there doing commercial lending. Our bank is a family-owned bank, probably the 5th largest in the state. In rough numbers, we're about $3 billion, and we have about 400 employees and about 40 locations, give or take a few. So my job is to kind of help family businesses, and one of the family businesses I've been able to help is I've been able to help Wolter. I've known Jerry for about 15 years, and I've seen Wolter grow from basically small Brookfield operation. They went up through central Wisconsin, out to western Wisconsin, down to Illinois, and now they have, I believe it's about 17 locations in 17 states.
7 states.
7 states. 17 locations in 7 states.
Next year, 17.
So Jerry, and what I've seen, this is Jerry Weidmann from Wolter, and why don't you talk a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself and what Wolter does, and go from there.
All right, my name is Jerry Weidmann. I've been the president of Wolter since 2007. I joined the company in 1991. It's a family business. The way I came to be involved with the business is nepotism. So I married a daughter, one of 4 children. My father-in-law started lobbying me almost immediately to come into the business, and I kept explaining to him that having both of us in the same building probably wouldn't be good for either one of us. So he got me by saying, "Gee, Jerry, I have a problem down in Illinois. Could you go take a look?" So I'm in the 32nd year of a 1-month consulting project, which means I'm either a very loyal consultant or very bad at it. I'm not sure which. But basically, the story of Wolter itself, my father-in-law founded the business in 1962 out of a garage. He was the only employee. His former employer failed to give him a 25-cent raise, and he said, okay. Well, in 2010, we bought the company that wouldn't give him the 25-cent raise. So in the early years, he started in Milwaukee, moved out to Brookfield, built the business organically. Back in those days, you could find plenty of people to hire. And so he built first the Milwaukee general area and then started moving throughout the state of Wisconsin. The growth was almost totally organic. When the business got to the point in around 2000, the early 2000s, actually we started our first bigger acquisition in 1995. It became more difficult to hire enough people to sustain organic growth. You also have relationships with manufacturers. We're a distributor of material handling products, so we sell lift trucks and the warehouse equipment and automation equipment. We have technicians, we have parts people, and do rentals. We have about 1,500 rental units throughout that 7-state region. We have 580 employees, and we operate out of branches that are located close to our customer. So once we got to the point where expansion in the original footprint became a little more difficult, we started doing acquisitions. We've now done about 20 acquisitions. And acquisitions from as small as 3 people to as many as 50 people. At the present time, we have 1 in due diligence, 2 more in the batter's box, and it's become part of our culture. So we've watched the business grow from that very small 1-person operation up until the handoff to me was in 2007, and now to 580 employees.
Pretty impressive, pretty impressive. We're here to talk a little bit about culture. You know, when I walk into Jerry's office, they're headquartered in Brookfield. They have a sign when you're sitting there waiting, and it talks about their mission, it talks about their pillars, it talks about your culture and your deliverables. One of the things I would like to know is has the culture with almost 600 employees, has that changed from the time that Otto started with just a few guys in Brookfield to as you acquire these things? How has culture changed?
Well, Mike told me that this wasn't going to be recorded, but I see there's a camera here. You know, when the business started with my father-in-law, one person, and then a single location, and then as it grew, he was a young man. There were a lot of young people in the business. It was growing aggressively. He knew everybody. The families got together. They had parties that all the employees would come to at their home, and it was every one of our buildings in Wisconsin had a keg of beer for Friday afternoons. There was a pool table, a ping pong table. Each of the individual communities really formed their own little sort of family culture at each of the branches. And my father-in-law went out and started each one and took his person who was in charge of the administrative processes and would go out, set up the branch, train it, hire, and then move on to next. So each building now becomes its own individual entity. And so the culture, when you start very small and you know everybody individually, and then you start spreading out and you start going to more facilities, then to more states. You know, our reach now is 7.5 hours to go from Brookfield to St. Louis, or to go to Dayton, Ohio, or go to, it's almost as far to go to Eau Claire, Wisconsin, actually. So the cultural shift is like the whole scaling problem, right? So you're a family business, you have family values, you want to treat everybody in your organization in a very specific way, and you want them to feel like they belong, and you want them to stay with you. Our average employee tenure, if you count, including the businesses we've acquired, is between 15 and 16 years. And you don't get that by being all driven solely for the purpose of growing the business aggressively. You do it because you value the people and you value the culture. So as we've scaled, the issue becomes the challenge of how do you translate culture at each location to be the same. When you acquire businesses, when we've acquired 20, we're buying family businesses. But it's a family business that has a culture built around a prior family. Now we have to integrate them into a larger corporation and give them resources, but also enable them to sustain that same feel of a local business and a cultural business. I will tell you there's one sort of conceptual framework that I use that we talk about with our managers, and we just had our general managers meetings with a lot of people that we have bought recently, is if you look at your organizational chart, normally the way they're drawn is top down, where you have a CEO or a president, and then you have management, everything else. If you think of it differently, this is what we try and tell our people. The visual is, if I hold it up like this, each of this being an individual branch, each of those 4 branches belong to a region. The region reports up to corporate. If I look at it that way and I tell my corporate staff that your job is to support the region, to support the branches, your job is to make sure they have all the resources they need to take care of our customers. When we're talking to me as a manager or anybody that reports to me, or the regional manager's job is those people in the branches, those branch managers, he's there to support them. You know, we at corporate, it's always a good thing to walk into a building and say, I'm from corporate and I'm here to help, you know, it goes over well. But the issue is that if you think that way, that means that the role of corporate becomes, I look at it as a long roadway, the strategic vision's out here. We communicate the strategic vision to all of these locations, all of these regions. We tell them what the processes are and the procedures are, provide them the infrastructure to make it happen. But within those 2 lines on either side of the road, we say, that's your role. Take it towards the vision, but honor the principles of treating everyone like family as part of that process of taking it to that vision. So when we bring in a company, there's always a tension, right? Because you've just walked in. Probably one of the questions Mike asked me before is mistakes you've made. Well, let me just tell you how not to do an acquisition. I had one where the principals did not want to tell their employees that they were selling the business. The day of, I was out in the lobby area, and so his whole statement was, "I sold the business. Here's your new boss." I can tell you that doesn't work real well. So anyway, but the issue is the day after that transaction takes place, and you are in fact trying to affect the culture. Our first mission, even though, well, my CFO's back here, and he says you will always install the business system on the day of closing. And so if you want to warm the hearts of an administrative team, come in and say, we're going to take everything you know how to do, and as of today, you know nothing. And good luck. So, but anyway, the issue is right after the closing, the objective is to let them know that you're people, let them know that your values match their values, try and line them up with someone in the organization that knows their job so that they can be easily put into a position talking to someone comfortably to do their job and do it well. Because it's very, very disruptive to have a whole new structure just show up on your door. And because of the way letters of intent and non-disclosure and everything else works, there's not a whole lot that happens before you get there. So culture to us is a continuous challenge that we are working on. And we're actually implementing sort of a cascading communication technique that'll get us there. We have quarterly corporate staff meetings. We have quarterly regional meetings, where now what we found is the communication of our vision and initiatives down to everybody, every location is not being done the way we want. So we're now starting meetings that happen at each branch with each person engaged at one level or the other on a regular basis, so that if we have a corporate staff meeting, we communicate what's to be communicated to the region, what's to be communicated to everyone in the company. So communication is absolutely critical to sustain culture. If people don't feel valued, don't feel part of it, don't feel that they can reach out to anyone, you don't have communication of culture.
Very interesting. I'm surprised that there is a keg of beer mentioned in a Wisconsin facility as part of culture, so it's not surprising at all. Are there kegs of beer at the 17 other locations?
Well, the kegs went away, and we blame HR and our CFO and our insurance company for that. So.
Understandable. So, in regards to culture, I had some statistics that I found were pretty fascinating that I thought I'd share with everybody. It says a couple of statistics here. Company culture is an important factor for about 46% of all job seekers. Married candidates value culture more than their single colleagues. 94% of entrepreneurs and 88% of job seekers say that healthy culture at work is vital for success. And 86% of job seekers avoid company with a bad reputation. So with that, how has Wolter been able to successfully attract and keep employees, especially with the tenure that you had mentioned that your staff has?
Well, I mean, the same conversation we just had about trying to have a culture that is family-oriented, that people feel they belong. To me, there's an approach to management that I'm not sure where I first heard it, but if you're thinking about your involvement with other people in the company, it's called being approachable. And so that if somebody has an issue going on in their life and they show up at your door to talk to you, that they get your full attention and you are approachable. Any employee should feel comfortable coming to you with anything at any time. I can give you an example of how this played out for me. It was a lesson learned that was very telling. I had an employee in our Illinois operation who basically started throwing things and ranting in the parts department. And he was confronted by a supervisor who was unsympathetic, who basically told him, "Go ahead, hit me." Great management technique, I don't know where you learned it. And then they proceeded to come in and tell me, he needs to be fired, I won't do it because he'll kill me. So I said, that's an interesting circumstance, right? Well, this is a very interesting impact. I met with the individual and I said, "Mark, what's going on? I don't understand. Explain this to me." That morning, his stepfather held a gun to his mother's head. The police took his stepfather out of the house. He was having a bad day. And so I went back to the manager and I said, "Did you happen to ask him what was going on?" The message, I guess, that I learned from that is somebody who comes to work every day and behaves differently, there's in all likelihood something else going on in their life. And in the culture that we're trying to get our managers to think about is that approachability, that willingness to reach out and treat them not just as an employee. We're all humans. We all have problems. You know, whether it's I need time off for my daycare canceled on me, whatever the issue is, you need to understand what's going on the other side. So the challenge for us as senior leadership is to get that thought process communicated all the way through the whole system. And that's a forever thing. You know, buy another business. People turn over. You're going to have challenges going on all the time.
You talked about the seniority of a lot of your staff members. Can you talk a little bit? You've got two gray-haired people here talking in front of everybody.
Seasoned. You call them old, they're not old. They're seasoned.
Can you talk a little bit about the gray hair tsunami and how Wolter is addressing it?
Okay. So you may have guessed, I am the tip of the spear of the second generation in Wolter. I'm going to be 69 next month. We're in the process of handing off the business, and let's see, is he still here? Is he hiding back there? Oh, there he is, over there, Ross. So, Steve has been with us 40 years. He's retiring at the end of the year. Ross has been with us 28, 29 years. I've been with the company 31. I'm in my 32nd. Every year, we take the employee list. I get with my HR department. We have a succession planning chart. Every employee who is within a couple of years of potential retirement, which we view somewhere around age 62 when people will think about it. We go down that entire list and we plan for those transitions and we send it to the managers and tell them this is what's going on. We have, out of the 580, we'll have 15 to 20 retirements a year every single year for the next decade. And so we have to, and the people that are retiring tend to have 20 years experience, 30 years experience, and it will take you a long time in order to manage that. But the first thing for me on succession is awareness. Second thing is awareness at the right level and a plan on what you're going to do for it. At the executive level, I was handed off the presidency after more than a decade of working with my father-in-law, not in the same building, very critical. Then the handoff I've been working on, Ross came into our corporate headquarters in 2013. I think it just means we're slow, I'm not sure. But the process of doing that, we look at the organizational chart every year, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the things at the leadership level that we pay attention to. My skills are different than Ross's. My skills are different than Steve's. Steve's going to retire. We're going to replace him. We replaced our COO. So what we started doing at an executive team level is we did a 360 review of everyone, a Clifton strengths analysis of every person's strengths. We look at the strengths of the team, and as somebody is retiring out, our critical phenomenon here is to get the mix of skills in that senior leadership team to be balanced to continue the business long into the future. So, for example, I think I can say this, he's in the room. tell me if I got it right there or not. He came up the sales side of the business in 4 categories. Human relationships and sales stuff are his strength. Mine's strategy. Steve's analytical and execution. Of my top 15 strengths, I have 0 in execution. For me, I have 3 people extremely strong in the execution side. For Ross, one thing I have, two areas I have probably more of than he does, is both on strategy and analytical. We always joke about, well, if he's going to come to me, he's got to have the analytics, because otherwise I'm going to just send him back to do it, and I'll hear him coaching other people. If you're going to take that to Jerry, you better do the analytics first, because it's going nowhere. Well, that structural thought process of saying, what does the team need to run this business? As succession happens, what do I need to do? We're just doing this in the eastern region of our company. We bought a bunch of businesses. There's different strengths in the region, and we're trying to build that team for the future. So same process, 360s, and what are the strengths, and what does it cause you to think about in terms of how you're going to run?
Great answer, very thoughtful. You talked about looking at each team member. There's a famous book out there by G.E. Jack Welch, who basically kind of says, you know, as part of your looking at your team, you should cut out the bottom 10% because they're dead 10%. They are not contributing to anything. How do you kind of feel about that?
Well, I think in this economy, if you cut out 10% in 10 years, you wouldn't have a business. But the issue of family culture and business, I think failures of performance many times are caused by the leadership that promotes somebody and gives somebody jobs that they're not well suited to do. I think also there's life-changing events that people go through that may cause them to fail to perform. Part of being, I think, more human about this process is to recognize that, and if there's another place, another home for somebody who is not performing, you can't, culturally, I don't believe you can keep somebody who's just totally failing in a position. They will destroy the culture. What happens is people around them say, how can you keep that person? Their failure to perform causes me to have to work harder. I'm not going to stick in the company, I'm not going to stick in this department if you allow that to occur. So the critical thing, from my perspective, is when those things occur, it's not starting with the answer that I'm going to eliminate this person. You start with the question is, what is the problem? And if it's one that we have a mismatch between skills, is where can we do it? Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to accept that they should be changed and it should. They may leave. But we owe it, in my view, to our people to do everything in our power to help them succeed. That as a leader, I fail if I bring somebody on that can't succeed. I fail if they don't succeed. And if I put them in a position where they can't do the job, I mean, if you take 2 positions, you take an analyst or an accountant, and you take somebody who's got a sales background, and you say, I want you to sell. I think he can probably guess which one's going to do well, right? But if you put the right one in the right job, you're going to get a much, much better result. So to me, the responsibility is on the manager. And when I have a management problem, and Ross and I have had this conversation with other managers, when you have a manager who's not treating other people right or whatever, I follow the chain up, and the next leader up is responsible to fix the problem. I don't want to accept that 2 leaders can't work something out. So, anyway. I'm kind of passionate, sorry about that.
That's okay, that's okay. You know, you talked about the 7 states that you have employees in, so that means you've got Packers fans, Bears fans, Colts fans. You know, you have to cater to all of them. I'm sure the Bears fans don't want to take, that your employees want to take orders from Packer fans. So my question is this, in regards to family feel and kind of keeping that family feel, how do you do that in kind of a growing organization where you have to have some metrics, you have to have some items to keep things afloat?
Well, the first issue of what jersey they're wearing. I have a wardrobe that has 6 different professional teams. No, that's basically, I would say this about culture. It's handed down, right? So the person who runs our Illinois operation is the culture person that needs to carry the culture there. The person who runs St. Louis has to carry the culture there. Our job is to make sure they all understand what that means. But you can't do it remotely. I cannot sustain culture in 16, 17 locations remotely by a Zoom meeting. It has to be something that's done at that level. It's interesting. We do have a Cubs Brewers game that one of our Illinois guys always grabs all the tickets. And they come up to County Stadium because he likes it better than the Cubs. So, but you know, the cultures are different also when you look at rural versus city businesses. An interesting experience I had is we had a downturn, and we were 2 different locations. One was in a bigger city, one was in a smaller city. The question was, how are we going to scale the business for what's going to be a protracted downturn? The ones in the bigger city, in the Milwaukee area, these are technicians, voted their fellow technicians off the island. They said, cut the staff, keep our hours, which was a very interesting phenomenon. Our Janesville location said, we got this. They got together every Monday and allocated hours amongst the group. And if they had a guy who had a need, they made sure that person got the hours that week. It's a very interesting psychology. And what I find at least, between the rural, smaller branches tend to be much more, you can call it cliquish, but it's really just like a family, right? You go to a family reunion, you can call that cliquish too. There's some disharmony that goes along with that. But the bigger the branch, the harder it is to sustain that really very, very close personal time.
Great story. I have a few more questions, but what I'd like to do is we've got about 10 minutes left. Does the audience have any questions for Jerry? Go ahead.
You spoke earlier about a lot of the communication from you to here and that level and now extending. What are you doing to ensure the communication in the other direction? I mean, I understand the statement of be approachable,
right?
But how does that get implemented? What's the execution that has that happen?
Yeah, so we've done employee surveys, but we are probably not as proactive as we should be. We tend to react. When we sense something's not right, we will then do employee surveys. When we see metrics that tell us something's not right, we will go to the business and sit down with everybody in a very detailed level in a continuous improvement process. And we started doing this very specifically. We actually created a department for it. We call it the SWAT team. And the SWAT team was designed, when you do an acquisition, you create the need immediately for bringing a lot of talent and communication. And so we have 4 people, each has 30 to 40 years experience with the company. They go in with other people on a team to work with it. So let me give you an example. We had a cultural problem going on in our eastern region where there was people, and what happens when things start going badly on the metrics, people start turning on each other, right? They start pointing fingers. It starts going very, very negative. If you ever read the book, The Blame Game, it's a very, very typical thing teams do when things don't happen. So we go in, we bring everybody into a room, and we start a process. And the first part of the process is anything that we've talked about before is not going to be brought up here. We do stop, start, continue. We want your input. Every person in that region has input as to what we need to start doing, what we need to stop doing, what we need to continue doing. So we're doing it not as a general rule everywhere. It's where we know where it's obvious that things are going on. We could do a better job of just sort of the whole company process. But what we found with that process is you bring the team together to solve a problem. The team coherence goes way up. So if you've studied team dynamics, the 4 phases of a team, it's forming, storming, norming, and performing, right? Well, you can go from performing to storming by typically, in our case, we changed some things on what our expectations were. In other cases, we gave them responsibilities for things they didn't understand. They start to fail. Now the storming comes in, which is that blame game, where everybody starts blaming. So by having a process for that, other people have participated. We've probably done it, I don't know, 5 times at this point. We have one going on, actually 2 going on right now at this moment, that are focused on areas that we need improvement in the company. And culture sometimes goes negative because of your process or your staffing. And it's not necessarily culture that's the problem. You're understaffed, too much work, and your process isn't smooth enough to give a reward to the employee at the end of the day. They go home and say, I didn't get anything done I wanted to, things aren't going well, their coming to work is no longer a good experience. So understanding what the issues are and having a sort of easy way to take it forward is part of it. So that's how we do it.
Is there another question? If not, I have one last question for you. Trends and watching trends seems to be a big trend out there for work-home life balance and the work from home, and that's all kind of been started in the last couple of years. Can you give your thoughts on that from a culture standpoint and what Wolter's doing for that? And then we can have drinks.
Hey, I don't want to hold you up from that, but let me see if I can be a little more succinct. Probably not, but I'll try. So the work-life balance triggered by pandemic, March 16th, our IT department, we send everybody we can home. We take our technicians and we start doing rotating furloughs, and we dramatically shift the number of people coming into work. Pandemic ends, people start coming back. The question becomes to us as leaders, what are we going to do? Are we going to have a philosophy that mandates downward, that this is the way we're going to do it everywhere? What we decided was to, again, honor the organizational design and said to each manager, we will support any decision you make for remote work. You have to decide whether the job can be done remotely. And secondly, you have to decide if the person in the job can work remotely. Because I think there's a misnomer here. A lot of jobs can be done remotely. A lot of people don't have the self-discipline to work remotely. So doing both correctly, I think works. So what we did is, I don't want to make a call for somebody in Louisville, Kentucky. They know the people, they're working with them every day. So we said, managers can make that decision. We do allow people to take PTO by the hour. We do allow for people to work from home when they have family things that they have to do, and we try and be flexible. But we leave it to the manager who is closest to the situation to make sure that everybody's taken care of. The policy basically says you apply for it, there's a review process, their manager has to sign off on it, and it's not permanent. So if you don't honor the benefit that you get from it, then it may be taken away from you. But again, I think as a family business, having flexibility for family events, I mean, we have people, you have people that have family members that get ill, you're having kids, there's lots of things going on, and to provide that flexibility allows them to be more comfortable, it makes them more productive. So that's the way we approach it.
Well, good. Well, it's getting close to our time here. I would personally like to thank Jerry for doing this. Obviously, he's very busy managing a big corporation, so to take time and share culture, I truly appreciate it. So could we please give Jerry a big round?